Hello, everyone, and good day to you out there. I hope everyone is doing great. This is Roger, of course, with Grubus Games Unlimited, the creator of Dungeon Crusade, the Avalon Adventure board game, and welcome back to our ongoing series here on how to set up and play the Avalon Adventure board game and Dungeon Crusade. So I hope everyone's doing great today. A few new subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing. It's very awesome to have you here, and I hope you're enjoying all this crusade chaos that's going on. And if you just stumbled on this channel, welcome. It's very nice that you're here. Consider subscribing to the channel with just clicking the little symbol below. That way you'll be notified when all the new videos come out. And I do have a lot of videos planned for over the summer. I think you'll really enjoy. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm excited. I want to get back into this. It's going to be a really fun video today and very informative. Of course, this is the next video in the series for advanced setup. We just did basic setup, so now we're going into advanced. Later in the video, I have a few tips for you. And since you like that hidden game variant, like bonus video thing, thank you for that. That was very nice of you. And on that topic, I had a few messages, some emails, and of course your very nice comments about basic setup and the hidden game variant. So I'm very grateful to you, sincerely. Thank you. I love making these videos. I love hanging out with you to get you more in tune and acclimated to Dungeon Crusade. I really thank you for that. I had some people tell me that after they saw basic setup, you know, the people who had the game, they really started to understand it more. You know, they're getting more acclimated to it, and it's not, as I said, it's a girthy game, of course, but it has very easy game mechanics, very easy. But there's just a lot of cool stuff in the game. So I'm glad that, you know, if you're picking up on this, and if you're playing along at home, that's very awesome. And so get ready, because you're going to be playing more or getting more set up so we can play. Of course, we're going to be going over advanced setup that I'm looking forward to, and I hope you are too. However, I think you're going to enjoy this little section here. We're going to derail a little bit, and I don't think I've ever went this in depth before. Maybe in the past videos I have. I don't know. This one's going to be pretty in depth. But I want to share with you the scenario system that I created for the game. And it's, I think, if you haven't seen it already, I think it's fairly creative, and it just offers, you know, so many different game variants and almost unlimited replayability. So before we get into advanced setup, I want to go over some of this for you. And I think by the end of this, when I describe all this, I think it's going to click, and you're really going to, the doors are going to open for Dungeon Crusade and see all of the things that you can do here. So I'm going to set this over here, and let's go over this together, and I think you'll enjoy this. Okay, I thought it would be good to start with this, kind of like the big picture. Avalon. This is, of course, the map of Avalon, and I tried to fit all of it in here, but this is quite a vast land. Okay, so when I created this land of Avalon, I also created 10 scenarios for Dungeon Crusade based in the land of Avalon. Remember a few videos ago I showed you those 60 unique quests? Okay, all of those are tied to the scenarios. So the scenarios are spread out all around Avalon. You're going to be defending different villages, like Hunter's Watch over here, Salem Port up in the north, Witherbrook, Stonefield, so on and so forth. So for right now, let me take you to scenario 1, Into the Depths, and the village we're going to be defending. So our first scenario, Into the Depths, is going to take place right here in Witherbrook. And think of Witherbrook as like the capital, the main city in Avalon. So the heroes have just arrived in Witherbrook for the Into the Depths scenario. So here is scenario 1, Into the Depths. And I think the best way to get into this is, why don't we discuss the top half of the page, and then we'll get into the bottom half of the page. Okay, so let's discuss this top half of a scenario page. And I want to go over each thing so you know exactly what it is and what it means in the game. Starting off here, I did the graphic design for the scenario book. So I had just put a cool monster or creature up in the left-hand corner. It doesn't mean anything. It was just something cool to put there. Of course, in the middle here, tells you the scenario number and the name of the scenario. Over here, like we just discussed, this has the village that your heroes are defending. So like we just discussed, they're defending the village of Witherbrook. This middle section right here is the flavor text I wrote, and kind of just encapsulates like the quests that your heroes will be on. This is one of the characters from the story I wrote for Dungeon Crusade. This is a hero in Avalon named Ren Osis. And I think this would be a good time to say this now, because I've been asked that when I wrote the story for Dungeon Crusade, there's all these different characters, and I planned it as a trilogy of games. So, of course, this is book 1, Genesis of Evil. I'm already working on book 2. But please know that each Dungeon Crusade game or book is going to change drastically. And I just always believe in giving people something innovative and new, and not just doing the same thing over and over again. So each book will be a different kind of game to give you a new experience, but there will be plenty of expansions for each book. So I hope you like the sound of that. I'm very excited about book 2. And we'll get more into that later on. So this just tells you the character who's greeting the heroes into Witherbrook. Down here is some important information. And hopefully if you've been watching the series, remember those quest tables over there in the Dungeon UI board? Okay, keep those in mind. Right here, these are the quests for quest table 1, level 1. Over here, quest table 2, there's the quests for quest table 2. Finally, quest table 3, here's the quests for quest table 3. And like I said before, notice it says kill the guardians. That will always be here. This will never change. And we're going to discuss that when we get to the bottom here. So right off the bat, when we get into it, you're going to pull these quest cards. Notice there's a main quest and side quest, just like those tokens you saw over on the quest table. So this tells you your main quest right here. All you have to do is look at the token here. And of course, here is your side quest here. So you're going to need those quest cards. Remember, there's no quest card with Kill the Guardians. If you saw before what that quest is, we'll discuss that when we get to the bottom here. Okay, we are now going to discuss the bottom half of a scenario page, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. We're going to spend a few minutes here, but by the end of this little segment right here, you're going to see just how much you can do with this game. All right, let's start up here where it says Dungeon. Like I showed you before, this is simply the dungeon you're going to be using for the scenario. So we went over that in basic setup. Next here is the hero's starting gold. Remember, we discussed this. And I want to give you one of my side notes. For your first game, I would recommend not rolling a D3 and giving each hero 300 gold. Just for your first few games, make it easy on yourself. So I would recommend just give each hero 300 gold starting out. Or, of course, you could just roll the die, the D3, and see what would come up. That's what those, of course, the die means. You're going to roll on that chart. So moving along here, seeding. This is something, after you set up your main quests and side quests, you're going to gather these tokens here. So, the level 1 monster, 2 level 1 monster, champion monster tokens, 6 level 2, 3 empty chamber tokens, so on and so forth. and you're going to put those into a bag. We're going to come back to this, but just know this is kind of like that dungeon randomizer or generator kind of thing, okay? Over here, this is the bazaar inventory. Remember that little bazaar I showed you on the village board? This is exactly what this is here. Now, we're going to get into these difficulties here, and I'm going to talk to you about the 3 game modes. This is healing potions, this is elixir potions, ochre juice, and torches. Of course, healing potions will give 6 health back to your hero. Elixir potions will heal your heroes of afflictions. Ochre juice will restore 6 points of essence to a hero, and when your hero buys a torch and lights it, that will give them 2 to their base movement. Let's discuss the 6 difficulties here. As you notice, it goes all the way down from, novice, easy, normal, hard, expert, and master. What this means is that's what you're going to populate the bazaar with. So for your first game, like I said, I recommend playing on novice difficulty. So what you're going to do is take 8 healing potions, 8 elixir potions, 8 ochre juice, and 10 torches, and place those over there on the village in the bazaar. We're going to go over this quickly after I show this to you. So as you can see, if you move the difficulty up, there's less and less, making the game much harder. Now, we're just talking about the 1 game mode right now. The first game mode is just pick a difficulty and you go right down each list and do as it says. So that's just the 1 out of 3 game modes. We're now going to discuss the Blacksmith inventory. But before we get into this, let's go over to the village again, and I want to show you the blacksmith's shop, because I think it'll all fall in place when we come back to this. Okay, here we are in the village again. And real quickly, here's the bazaar. And just like we discussed for novice difficulty, I already placed the 8 healing potions, the 8 elixir potions, the 8 ochre juice, and the 10 torches here. So that part of advanced setup is done. So I just figured we'd do this now since we're over here discussing this. This right here is the blacksmith's shop. Actually, there's like a little building up here. But right here is common gear, white. Here is uncommon gear, green. Here is rare gear, blue. Here's epic gear, purple. And finally, legendary gear, which is orange. So for what I'm going to talk to you now about, you're going to see where all of this goes. Okay, and we're back here discussing the blacksmith inventory. So see these values here? That's how many loot cards for each rarity that you're going to populate the blacksmith shop with at the beginning of a game during advanced setup. So let's take a look at novice difficulty. Remember, this is just like I just described the colors. White, common, green is uncommon, blue, rare, purple, epic, orange, legendary. So we can see if we play on novice difficulty, his shop is going to be plentiful with tons of different kinds of loot. There's going to be 16 uncommon items, 14 uncommon items, 12 rare, 10 epic, and 6 legendary. So the heroes are going to have a feast with all this different gear in his shop. But as you notice, as you go up in difficulty, it gets more scarce. On Master, starting out, there's only 6 pieces of white loot. Green, there's only 4, so on and so forth. So what you're going to do is, and I'm actually going to show you that now, you're going to divide up your loot deck into these rarities. Let me get the cards and let's go over that real quick. Okay, so here you can see I divided up the white common deck here, the green uncommon deck, the blue rare deck, the purple epic deck, and the orange legendary deck. Also, I want to point out these special loot cards. You're going to notice that there are these loot cards that have like a gold accent to them and gold letters. This is what's known as fabled gear, and they're all weapons. And these are weapons that belong to some of the characters in the story I wrote for Dungeon Crusade. And there's 2 for each rarity. So make sure that you mix those in with these. We're playing on novice difficulty. So we're going to shuffle each of the decks and deal out this many cards to the blacksmith area. Before we head over to the blacksmith shop, I want to make mention of something. These cards here are underworld artifacts. You can tell by the black crystal right here, and these are the junk loot cards. You're going to leave these out of those decks for now, and you're going to shuffle these cards back in a moment here. Okay, and we're over here in the blacksmith shop, and I just populated his shop with exactly what we talked about right here. So there is 16 pieces of white common gear, 14 pieces of green uncommon gear, 12 pieces of blue rare gear, 10 pieces of purple epic gear, and finally 6 pieces of legendary gear. Just like it says for novice difficulty. And as a side note, when the heroes are in their shopping phase or during celebration day, you can go through all of these cards and find gear that you like. There were some players that thought that they had to draw the top card. That's not the case. So picture this just like a big blacksmith shop, and all this is on display. Everything is available for purchase. Let's go back over here with the loot deck and finish that up. Okay, now we're going to form the loot deck for the game. Here are those underworld artifacts, the black level. Here's the junk loot, and here are the various decks with the uncommon, common, rare, epic, and legendary. What you're going to do is put all of these together and give it a really good shuffle. And then you could just set this by the village board or by the dungeon UI board. And I just wanted to show you, there is the loot deck with everything mixed together like you just saw. We're now going to focus on this last column here, and I'm going to go in depth for a few of these things just so you understand it. And just know that all of these 5 different entries right here gives Dungeon Crusade that unlimited replayability, and you can create so many different game variants just from this column. Let's start here with the village tier level. Let's shoot back over to the village board so I can tell you exactly what that is. Here we are over on the village board, and here is the village tier level. You can see this track goes from 1 all the way up to 12, with 12 being the skull that says defeated. Let's shoot back to our scenario page quickly and take a look at this entry for the village tier level. Notice these different values here. It's associated with the different difficulties: novice, easy, normal, hard, expert, and master. For right now, we're playing on novice. Take one of your red markers for Dungeon Crusade and place it on the first space. Okay, so what is this village tier level? This keeps track of minions that escape the dungeon and raid the village. Every time a minion escapes the dungeon and heads to the village, you're going to move this up by 1. If another minion escapes and makes it to the village, you're going to raise it up again, so on and so forth. If the counter ever reaches the skull, defeated, the scenario is immediately over and the heroes have lost. Let's go over minions real quick, and this is where I want to get a little in depth for you because it's a very cool and exciting game mechanic that I think you'll enjoy. And here are some of the various minions in Dungeon Crusade. Before we begin, I want to say I'm going to be talking about a few things that may not make sense now, but in a few minutes you'll understand it because it's some of the entries in the scenario book, okay? First of all, when minions spawn into the dungeon, they are known as vagrant minions. Vagrant meaning, walking around aimlessly. This is their home, so they're just casually strolling through the dungeon. However, if a minion ever sees a hero, or rather gets line of sight of a hero within 4 spaces, that minion will convert into a raiding minion. You're going to place one of these tokens on that minion's monster card to signify that now is a raiding minion. The other way a vagrant minion can convert into a raiding minion is from the raid die. Now, I'm going to explain this briefly because the next entry we're going to be talking about is the raid difficulty. So, as you know, there's 6 difficulties. If you're playing on Novice, the raid die for minions is a D20. 20, of course, is the highest value. So when you go to generate a minion's movement, you're going to roll the raid die, this D20 on Novice difficulty. If 20 is the result, you're going to place a raid token on that minion's monster card, signifying, of course, it's a raiding minion. Okay, I thought it would be fun to set up a little demo for you and explain a few things so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we are in the monster phase right now, and here is a Blackwood Prowler. It's the start of its turn. Let's take a look at its monster card. Right here, notice this entry here. It says D6 plus 5. What that means is it has a base movement of 5 plus the roll of a D6, okay? So we rolled the D6, we came up with 5. 5 plus 5 is 10. It generated 10 movements for its turn. We rolled the raid die, playing a normal difficulty, or novice difficulty, and 20 came up for the raid die. That means it will convert into a raiding minion. It will immediately follow the red bloody arrows out of the dungeon to raid the village. So I want to count this out too, because there was a few people that had a question about when a minion leaves the dungeon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That step out, we're going to go over to the village for. That last step out of that white box is considered they're in the village for gameplay's sake and make it easier. So let's head over to the village. So the Blackwood Prowler has made it into the village, and of course the villagers are just panicking. So what you're going to do is come up to the terror level track and move it up by 1. Finally, you can take the Blackwood Prowler card, shuffle it back into the appropriate deck, and remove the Blackwood Prowler and put it back with your other minions. Before we go to the next entry in the scenario book, I did want to touch on something for you about the terror level. When we were looking at the terror level entry in the scenario book, you saw those predetermined numbers for the terror level. But please understand, you can set this to whatever you like, so you don't have to go with that. Just always remember, you can tweak this game to your liking. So if you want to start it at any number, even 11, if you think you're lucky, go right ahead. And we're going to move on with advanced setup, and now we're at the entry for raid difficulty. And this is going to make a whole lot more sense now because of what you just watched. So with the 6 different difficulties, these are tied to these different dice. So like you just saw, novice difficulty is a D20, easy is a D12, normal is the D10, hard is a D8, expert is the D6, and finally master is a D4. So like we saw with the Blackwood Prowler, if you're going to play on novice difficulty, you're going to use the D20. If a 20 ever comes up when the minion is generating its movement, that minion will convert into a raiding minion. Say we're playing on normal difficulty, we're going to use a D10. If a 10 would come up, 0 means 10. If 10 would come up, that minion would convert into a raiding minion. So you can see as the difficulty goes up, the chances of that highest value being rolled becomes greater. And here's kind of like a little secret variant for you, that if you're crazy enough to do this, there's actually a higher difficulty than master where you could roll a D3, meaning When you roll a d3, if 3 comes up, that minion is going to convert into a raiding minion. And finally, for raid difficulty, we're over here on the Dungeon UI board, and I had put this raid difficulty chart here just as a reminder. So what you could do is take another red marker token, and remember, we're playing on Novice. We're going to be using a D20. Go ahead and place that on the D20 spot. Okay, next for advanced setup, we're going to take a look at the Guardian spawn track. And that's a track over there on the Dungeon UI board. But let me explain what this is. You're going to be using a D20. And we can see there are 6 different difficulties. For Novice, we're going to place that on 20. So there's a phase in the game where there's a chance a Guardian could spawn into the dungeon. And remember, these guys are like the bosses of the dungeon. And quite simply, what you're going to do is, let's say that the track is starting out on 20 at the start of the game, you're just going to roll a d20. As long as that result is lower than what the track is at, no Guardian is going to spawn. So let's say that a 20 was rolled. That means you're going to spawn a Guardian into the dungeon. And of course, when we get to playing Dungeon Crusade, this will all come together for you. Let's head over to the Dungeon UI board so I can show you that track. And here is that Guardian spawn track I was telling you about. So we're going to take one of our red marker tokens like we've been using and just simply place it on 20 for Novice difficulty. And as you saw, if we're going to raise the difficulty, it's just going to get lower. So before we go here, let me explain. Like we saw with that small demo I just did, let's say that it's the start of the game and a 13 was rolled during the Guardian phase. Of course, no Guardian is going to spawn, right? 13 is lower than 20. What you're going to do then is lower that to the next value immediately. So, next turn comes around, you're in the Guardian phase, you're going to roll, and the result is a 12. Of course, that's not higher than 19. Go ahead and move that down. So it keeps moving down until it gets to 11. And of course, there's going to be a higher chance of Guardians spawning into the dungeon. And again, just like I said with the village terror level, feel free to set this whatever you like or even modify it. Maybe that you want an easy game. This is another kind of hidden game variant. Maybe you just want to lock it at 19. Feel free to do that. Maybe you want to start it at 11 and keep it at 11. You can do that. If you want to leave it at 20, so on and so forth. Remember, create the game session that you would like. And moving along with advanced setup, we're now at the entry for Guardians per quest table. And this is quite easy, and it seems our Guardian friends are sticking around for this. This entry right here is in direct correlation with these tokens like you saw over on the Dungeon UI board for quest tables. There's quest table 1, 2, and 3. They're not marked, but each one of these were on each quest table. And quite simply, this is all this means. How many Guardians do you want to spawn for your game? On Novice, you're only going to have 1 Guardian spawn. And that's for each quest table. There were a few questions about that, so I wanted to address that. So for quest table 1, you're going to have, if you're playing a Novice, only 1 Guardian is going to spawn. And of course, it's going to be random. You're going to draw from the deck. If you're playing on Easy, 2 Guardians are going to spawn for each quest table. If you're going to move up to 3, or normal, 3 Guardians are going to spawn, so on and so forth. So you can see Master, 6 Guardians are going to spawn into the dungeon. And kind of another hidden variant, consider 7 and 8 kind of off there. You can play with 7 Guardians that'll spawn or 8 Guardians. And that's for playing Mega Dungeon Crusade, where you're going to play with 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 heroes, and you're going to have all those Guardians. And yes, we'll get to Mega Dungeon Crusade. So just remember, this entry here, Guardians per quest table, are in direct correlation with these Kill the Guardians. For Novice, though, we're going to be playing on Novice, so only 1 Guardian is going to spawn per quest table, which is going to be a very easy game for you. Before we move on, I do want to touch on another hidden game variant with the guardians per quest table, and it's kind of like a progressive difficulty, if you will. We talked about Celebration Day. So when you start off on quest table 1, maybe you're only going to have 1 guardian spawn, okay? So when you go to Celebration Day, this is going to kind of move up. For quest table 2, you're going to have 2 guardians spawn. Then when you go to that next Celebration Day and you're going to make your final delve into the dungeon, 3 guardians are going to spawn. And you can move this up. So maybe you want to, at the beginning of the game for quest table 1, have 4 guardians spawn. When you're working on quest table 2, 5 guardians will spawn, and then 6 guardians. So yet another game variant and another thing you could tweak in Dungeon Crusade. Okay, and our final entry here for advanced setup is minion population, and this one's super easy. Basically, how many minions do you want to populate your dungeon? On Novice, we can see only 3 minions will populate your dungeon. If you move it up to Easy, 4 minions will populate your dungeon. Normal, 5 minions. Hard, 6 minions, so on and so forth. But please remember, you can set this to whatever you like. Maybe you only want to have 2 or maybe even 1 minion populate the dungeon just while you're getting acclimated to the game. Or, of course, maybe you want more. Let's shoot over to the Dungeon UI board so I can show you the minion population track. And here we are over here on the Dungeon UI board, and we're looking at the minion population track. So we're going to take one of our handy red marker tokens and just place it on 3 for Novice difficulty, meaning 3 minions will populate our dungeon. And please understand, there are certain game events that we're going to get to, and I'm not going to spoil it, that this track may go up and it may come down. So you'll discover that while playing. Lastly, yes, this track goes up to 18, and that's for playing Mega Dungeon Crusade, which we will get to. I would not recommend spawning 17 minions in for your first game. Let's just leave it at 3.